Amazon VPC. It's my cloud. Understanding AWS network management. I go, he's lost his mind. No, it's actually from Braveheart. There's a scene in Braveheart where they've got this kind of crazy guy, amazing movie, Mel Gibson, and they're fighting for Scotland, and this crazy guy just walks up and goes, "It's my island," but obviously with a much better Scottish accent than I can. Well, that's what VPC is all about. It's your cloud with whatever Scottish accents you can throw at it. EC2 is amazing, allows you to bring up some servers quick and easy. But what about when you need control? What about when I want to be able to say, well, I want to control the network. I want to be able to say what private IP addresses these guys get. I want to be able to set up a VPN. I mean, I'm starting to already get into all of the what is VPC. So let's unpack this thing. Let's get into what is VPC, why do I need it, and then we'll start going through the configuration options. And I envision this to expand into many different nuggets, talking about kind of the core setup, the quick and easy version of VPC, then getting into the nitty-gritty details from public to private to security groups. I mean, there's just a lot that you're able to do. Let's first define what virtual private cloud is all about. Best thing I can say about it is that it adds tangibility to this mysterious cloud environment. And think about it. When you first set up a server in AWS, you come to this mystical web interface and you say, I want a server. And poof, there it is. You have a server. Where is it? Somewhere. It's on a server somewhere in the cloud in a data center. What IP address does it have? 10.0. something, 59.201. What network is that on? I don't know. Something Amazon's managing. Is it secure? Well, yes. It's not able to access other people's servers. There's some mystical thing. You see what I mean? It's just kind of like, wow, what is that? So what Amazon lets you do at no extra charge, I want to emphasize this. This is a feature that's included with all your virtual machines, is define a virtual private cloud. And what that allows you to set up is an environment to where it feels traditional. You've got your router, right? Connecting to a switch, and you get to define what subnet that is. It doesn't just come from this mysterious 10 network that Amazon pulls virtual machines from. I can come in and say, well, I want it to come from 172.16.0.0. This is the network I want to use. And maybe these groups over here will use 172.16.1.0. Maybe these servers over here will have 172.16.2.0. And you start creating all these little custom subnets all over the place. Those are your VPCs. Those are your virtual private clouds, to where it really puts you in control of the networking. Now, once you do that, you have the ability to create access control lists. Now, this is beyond the security groups of before, because you can manage both outbound and inbound traffic. Before, it was just inbound only. Now I can say, okay, I want to filter what you're going out as. I mean, think about VPC as I am in control of the network. I have kind of like a real firewall feel to it. I can control inbound. I can control outbound. I control my IP addresses, my subnets. It also integrates right with Elastic IP, so I can provision my server on this new network that I created, this new subnet that I defined, and then start defining what public IP addresses map to what private ones. Man, if you come from a traditional environment, this is for you. I mean, this is your static NAT mappings, where I can go in and set up exactly the NAT mappings, what ports are coming through, all of that. Now, this next one is, I had to add an exclamation point here because it's pretty cool. That's my enthusiasm. Exclamation. When you set up VPC, it opens the door for site-to-site VPNs to your AWS environment. So what that means is you could have, I'll draw it in red. This is your company, your on-site router, firewall, whatever it is that manages all your employees that are sitting there on their computers, and you've got your own servers here and things like that. Well, Amazon allows you with VPC to define a virtual private network tunnel between your site and your AWS cloud. Wow. I said the wow too fast. Wow. It's amazing. I mean, what that allows you to do is now truly combine your networks together. This becomes your network. I can go to a PC on site and ping the server as long as I have allowed it with my access list. I can ping that server. I can get there. I can open a file share, drag and drop files to and from the on-site network. It really becomes like your own little data center where I can reach the different devices that are out there. That's pretty amazing. So that's called a hardware-based VPN, to where you've got some kind of firewall right here terminating it, maybe a Cisco firewall that is terminating that site-to-site VPN with the AWS side. And they provide all kinds of configuration examples. They really try to make it as painless as possible for you to just kind of plug and play these devices instead of the VPN. Last one, if this is of interest to you, VPC allows you to build your own dedicated hardware farm for a nominal cost. I always use nominal very loosely, but for a small fee of $10 an hour, at least that's the current going rate, is about $10 an hour as kind of the base charge, you can get your own hardware. And what this allows you to do is say, I don't want just logical separation. In AWS data center, racks and racks and racks of all these servers, and your little instance is running on a server with hundreds of other instances that could be other companies and all that. Some people are just like, gives me the EBGBs. I want my own hardware. So that's why the price is so steep, is because Amazon literally says, okay, here's a server for you that is physically separate from all the rest of our infrastructure. Now, it still has the same benefits. It's not like you lose S3 or anything else. You still have all the benefits. You still create instances on there to run your virtual machines and all that. It's just now a complete hardware separation to where now you can get your own physical boxes set up to host that. So that is the idea of VPC. Once you start to unpack VPC, you find out there's a lot of working pieces. This slide represents the first question that you're asked when you create a VPC. See, if you don't have one already, if you haven't created a VPC already, Amazon gives you a very convenient wizard that kind of walks through the step-by-step and creates all the pieces of a VPC for you. This is the first question that you're asked when you start that wizard. So let me show it to you, and then we'll come back here to describe it. I'm going to go to the AWS Management Console. Now, we're no longer in EC2 land. We're going to go over here to VPC. And when we first get in, it's going to say, there's nothing here. Do you want to create a VPC? And notice it says, no, it will be created in the West North California region. So whatever region you've selected up here will be where the VPC exists. So I'll say, sure, let's go. And here's the question. What kind of VPC do you want? You want the single public and private, yada yada. It kind of goes down the list. Now this is a huge question that you want to answer correctly the first time. So let's describe it. Now if you're a network ninja, you're going to have some issues right now, because when I see create a VPC with a single public subnet only, my mind says, okay, so this will be a subnet where the IP addresses are, yep, follow me, public. Yeah, are you with me? No, it's not how AWS does it. It's a kind of a weird method. So here's your VPC. Let's see you create it, and this will be the little land where you throw your instances, your running instances that you can manage inside of it. Now, when you define this, you're actually going to define a single, count it, private subnet. I'll use 172.30.100.0/24, which is actually the subnet that I use here at home. So you create this private subnet, which you'll then map to existing elastic IPs. I shouldn't say existing. You'll map to existing elastic IPs that are going to be mapped to your instance. So what's up with this? Why is AWS trying to throw us off by saying a single public subnet? Well, when you contrast it with this one, it starts to make sense. you start saying, okay, now let me say, if Jeremy designed this, I wouldn't have said a single public subnet, but we'll go with it, right? So single public subnet is a single private subnet that you map to elastic IP addresses to provide outside access. Good? Good. Okay. So VPCs with public and private subnets, which is your second option here in this list, right here, is where you can come in and create two different subnets, both of them private, with a NAT device sitting in between it. So here's the idea. Let's say we have our public subnet 172.30.100.0/24, same as before. I can now define a second subnet. Let's say back here I've got 10.1.30.0/24, which is truly a private subnet, a private only. Now, the way I kind of envision this is I envision our instances sitting right here. So maybe this is a web server that we decided to have running. We put one interface, one NIC, network interface card, sitting inside of here and give it a quote unquote, now I'm going to put public IP address that we map to an elastic IP address on the outside, right? So we've got our public coming in right here. And then we put another NIC. We'll put NIC 2 mapped back here that we give a maybe .50 private IP address that exists over here, and that one can be protected from over here. So what's the point? Why would I do that, Jeremy? Well, maybe you have a scenario where you've got a whole bunch of other servers back here. Maybe you've got database servers, DB. And the web server gets its content from these database servers. It pulls, it checks access, it gets images, whatever else is stored in that database server. It wouldn't get images, but you get the point. It gets whatever data it needs to pull from that database servers. These guys, which would maybe be .51, .52, different private IP addresses in that 10.1.30 subnet, don't need to be exposed to the outside, and they're just kept on their own little world. So how do they, what if they do need to get to the internet? Well, they can pass through this NAT instance. Notice I said instance, which is generated from an AMI automatically. So when I choose this option, it will add to my cost because Amazon automatically adds a instance, an AMI, which does the NAT. Now I have full control of that instance, and then I could even say I don't want to use yours. I want my own little NAT device and create a Windows or a Ubuntu or whatever kind of operating system I want and start doing NAT on that operating system between the two. But Amazon tries to make it easy. They kind of throw one in there by default if you don't do that. So you get the difference. So single public subnet really means single private subnet mapped to public IP addresses, whereas VPC with public and private really means two private ones. It's just one of them have direct mappings to the elastic IP addresses on the outside. Now, what about these other twos? These other two options are the same exact option. Matter of fact, it's easier to see right here. Same exact options. It's just with this hardware VPN access added into the fray. What's that? Well, I mentioned it on slide 1. That's where I can now have my corporate network or my home or whatever I have connected in straight with a VPN connection. So I can go straight to these private IP addresses, not rather than coming the roundabout way of the public end where I have to add access to get there or use something through the management console or something like that. I can literally have my servers over here. Maybe this is the 192.168.5 network. And I have that network which is able to come across and access the 172.30.100 network directly, not coming in through their public IP addresses. And same thing there. I can tunnel it out to here or tunnel it to there, wherever I want that VPN access. So it will require, that's why they say with hardware VPN access, it's just get messy, right? It will require me to put some kind of device. Maybe you buy a Cisco router. Matter of fact, there's a ton of guides online if you have it like buy a cheap Cisco 2600, maybe it's 2611 XM router, which is two just straight up 10 meg interfaces on there where you can do a little VPN connection for. So you need some kind of device here to terminate that VPN, but now you have full access into that subnet. So let me clear off that board and get back to a white drawing slate here. What I want to do in this nugget is start off with the core of VPC, kind of that first scenario, the single public private, whatever you want to call it, subnet, where we define a subnet, and I'd like it to be that 172.30.100.0/24 subnet. I'm going to put an instance inside of there. I don't know why I have that hole there. An instance inside of there that is mapped to an elastic IP address. I'm going to give this guy a static IP address on the inside of my network, and define security groups, everything that kind of goes along with that. So walk with me through this. I'm going to start off and let's just say VPC with single public subnet over. Continue. It says, okay, what do you want for your subnet? So it gives me two major options. It says, number one, we need to define our parent CIDR block. By default, it's going to be 10.0.0.0/16, CIDR being classless interdomain routing. It's a big block of public IP addresses. Now, you notice right here it says /16. Amazon will let you go bigger than that if you call them and ask, but they're gonna have the question, why? Unless you're, unless you rule the world, how many IP addresses do you need? Now, this is the parent block of which we will define subnets within that block. So, check this out. I'm going to go in. I'm going to say my parent block is 172.30. We'll say that's good. And now it immediately is like, whoa, that subnet is no longer within that range. I'm going to say, okay, sorry. Let's modify this and make it 172.30.100.0/24. So I'm grabbing a little class C subnet, a little block of 200 to 251 available IP addresses, because it actually takes one out for the gateway, takes one out for the DNS server. There's reserved private IP addresses from there. So I've got 251 that are left. You have your network, your broadcast, so on. And then it's saying, what zone do you want that in, or do you not have a preference? I'll say no preference. So this is my first subnet of my parent block. Now I can define more subnets, just not here. I can define 172.30.101, 102, 15, whatever I want, as long as they're all derivatives of this CIDR block. Now the big question, hardware tenancy. Do you want to have the default, which means I'm sharing my instances on the same hardware as everybody else at Amazon? That's the norm, unless you have loads of money, because you can also choose dedicated. And this is where Amazon literally says, that server, yeah, the one we paid 10 grand for, it's yours. Go ahead and use it. But of course, they're going to make you pay a pretty penny for that, because they're dedicating physical servers to you. Now you have complete isolation from the rest of the AWS cloud. We're not going to do that. Notice they're like, additional charges will apply. Don't do that. So I'm going to click on create. So this little wizard is kind of going chunk, 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 because it's creating all the individual pieces of the VPC. You can see we've got our subnets that have been created. We've got routing tables that have been created, internet gateways that have been created. I mean, all these different things. We haven't broken these down yet. We'll talk about them. Are created for us. So now, if we're kind of going through the process, the next piece that I would create is a security group. Now, I know, I'm anxious too. I want to get straight into the instances and throw an instance into this VPC, but it's always best to have the security group set up beforehand. Now you can see I've got my default security group, and this is using the normal permissions. Actually, let me back up. I want to kind of define security groups. Remember this? We talked about security groups before as they related to EC2. And what those were is the ability to allow or deny accesses to my instances. Now, in the EC2 world, our security groups only focused on the inbound access. We could allow or deny based on that. When we move into the VPC world, not only do we not get to reuse these, we immediately, poof, all our security groups are gone. We don't have any inside of VPC because they're all different. But we also have the ability to also restrict on the outbound. I can permit or deny things on outbound. Now, in the EC2 world, I don't have this ability. It's basic. They don't allow me to do that because, I mean, how many people want to restrict outbound for their servers? It's not the norm. That's why Amazon moves it over here. So first off, the default permissions. Remember, in security groups, by default, all inbound access is denied. All outbound access is permitted. So it's the same way when we come into the EC2 world. Now here's our default one. I'm not even going to use that one. I like defining my own. So let's just create a security group called VPC. We'll just maybe call it VPC A dash. Here, let's make it a little prettier. A dash Linux. Because I'm going to have a security group for my Linux servers. Description, whatever. what VPC is this associated with, and this is it. I only have one VPC, and that's the secret ninja code word that's been assigned to my VPC. So I click on Yes Create, and just to prove it, and there's my VPC ID. It doesn't let me rename that or anything. So I've got my VPC. So I now have this security group that's created. So I'm going to come into, let's uncheck this, come into my VPC A Linux. Inbound, you can see nothing. Nothing's there. So I'm going to say I want a custom rule. What is this? It's a web server, right? So we'll click on port 80 is added. Port 443 is added. Maybe we've got a little FTP as well that's being added. So that's all being allowed. Ooh, we want to, for administration, we're going to allow port 22 so that we're able to SSH to this device. So we'll add that in there. We can go in and apply those rule changes. So we've got those in the list. We'll then go to the outbound. And you can see the default rule is that everything is allowed. Now, the difference between this and the EC2 world is I can delete that. And I can then go in here and say I only want to allow, maybe I only want to allow my servers to surf the web, right? Port 80 and port 443, HTTP and HTTPS, are going to be allowed on the outbound destination. Everything else is denied, restricted, that sort of thing. So again, if I wanted to, I could. Now, I'm not going to apply that because I don't want to restrict it on the outbound, but you get the idea. So now I have my first little security group that's created. I left the outbound at default, didn't apply those, and here's my inbound. Oh, other big benefit of VPC is that unlike EC2, I can change my security group for my instances after they are running. Whereas with EC2, once you've created the instance and assigned it to a security group, it's there forever. You can't change it. So now we can. So now we can hold our breath. It's what we've all been waiting for. Let's create the instance. So I'm going to go back over to EC2, my virtual servers in the cloud. I'll go to my instances, and let's just go ahead and do launch instance. I'm going to say classic wizard. Let's give myself a little Ubuntu server, because they load much faster. Ooh, here's something big. You might say, okay, well, let's add it to the VPC. It says right here we've got EC2, then we've got VPC. VPC is not compatible with the selected instance types. Huh? What? You know, is that... I always love just random stuff. What? What? Huh? So wait a second. Is that like an Ubuntu thing? Wait, okay, let's throw maybe Windows with SQL Server in there. Okay, let's go in here. Huh? What? Huh? How come? Welcome to the biggest debate in AWS history. If you are bored, if you're kind of like, you know, I need a little break from AWS. I want a little politics and ferocious people. Go into Google and type in VPC and Amazon micro instances and be prepared for fun. You'll probably find a forum post. It's got to be one of the top ones in there. That's like 500 pages long. That's been going on for years. See, here's the fact. You can pick whatever instance you want. I'm going to go back to Ubuntu. But if you have a micro instance selected, no dice. You're not going to get VPC. You have to select at least a small instance. Now, if you go through the forum post, which I did because that's what I do, and read all of these angry people's responses, that why can't I add a micro instance to VPC? According to Amazon, it is a technical limitation. Like there's technically something that won't allow them. Maybe it's what servers they're using. That's what I would say. It's probably they have a dedicated farm just for those tiny micro instances that people bring in and throw away like nothing. That they just don't bring into the VPC world. And you'll see this post has just been going on for years. I know. Forgive me. You're probably like, just get on with it. Yeah, but it's just interesting to see the politics because Amazon has actually said, yes, we're going to do this. So maybe by time you're hearing this is now lit up. But literally, Amazon has been saying, yes, we're going to make the micro instances compatible with VPC. For years, they've been saying that, and they still haven't. So nonetheless, we're going to stick with small. I'm going to go to small instance. And now when I choose VPC, notice my subnet 172.30.100 shows up in the list. Sweet. Now I click continue. Now usually, it's advanced instance. You're kind of like, yeah, move on. But look at this. Look at this. Number of network interfaces is set to 1. Now this is new. This wasn't here before. And notice it's part of my subnet. Now if I had more subnets, this would be an active dropdown. And I can say, well, either auto assign it or you know what? I feel like statically assigning my instance IP address. Matter of fact, I want to add another one. I want a second. You see what I mean? I could go in here and add all kinds of, till the cows come home, all these different secondary IP addresses because it's my network. I totally have control over the networking. I could even add another interface in here. Even though they're both connected to the same network, if for whatever reason I wanted two interfaces on here, there's reasons. There may be some services are tied to one interfaces, other services are tied to the other. I can. But for now, I'm just going to keep it to one. So that's, now I don't have to. Notice if I leave it at this, I have DHCP options, which I'll talk about in a second. And DHCP will auto-assign an IP address, but I'll stick it in there. And click on continue. So I've got my hard drive space, and I can go in and add more hard drive space. What kind of and this is kind of a new option that since I even started this series they've added to where I can go in and say, well, I want certain IOPS. I can, and this is glorious. I can say I want super screaming storage for this if I want to. But we're just, for that we're not talking about that for now. I'm just going to say I'll just take the 800 gigabyte standard, and we'll say this is my VPC Ubuntu instance. That'll be my name. CBT pair, that's fine. VPC A Linux, that's fine. Oh, this is my security group, so I'm using one of my existing one. That's the one that I created. That's fine. Click continue and launch, and voila, we now have my instance in the background that is being launched into my VPC. So there's my VPC Ubuntu. So now, as we're waiting for that to load and come into the system, let's shoot back over to the VPC world. So I'm going to jump back here because when this guy comes up, it's not running yet. So it's still, hang on, let's hang out for a little bit because I want at least it to show up right here in my running instances. All right, there we go. My instance is now running, which is great. And I can click on this, and it actually shoots me back over to EC2. And I can see the stats. We've got this guy running. Scroll down a little bit because you'll notice something's missing here. I scroll down and it goes, aha, there's my private IP, just like I had specified. It's static as my .20. But what's missing? What's missing? Public. There's nothing public about this guy, as in he is isolated from the rest of the world. He is in his own little private subnet, which again makes me laugh that Amazon calls this a single public subnet. No, it's not. It's a private subnet that I just haven't even associated any public IP addresses with. So Amazon is essentially telling us, you wanted control of the networking, you got it, buddy. And this is now completely isolated from you unless you have some kind of VPN that is able to reach that private IP address. So let's get back over because we need to create a elastic IP address. So I'm going to shoot down here. We'll do elastic IP, and I'll say I want one. Oh, and notice right here, it's saying, where do you want it? Do you want it in VPC or EC2? Just like security groups, we have a completely different set of IP addresses for, elastic IPs for EC2 and elastic IP addresses for our VPC instances. So really, those two worlds, just imagine them just like that, two completely different worlds. So I've got my elastic IP address, and I need to associate it. So I click on that. It says, okay, who are you associating this with? Okay, great. VPC Ubuntu, there's the private IP address. Or if I want to be more specific, maybe my machines have multiple network interfaces. I can do that and specify that as well. I'll just say for now I'll just associate with the instance and this private IP address. This is probably the better way to go, a little more logical. And I have the option for allow reassociation. So I can check this box, and that'll allow me to reallocate this public IP address to another instance, maybe without coming back and deassociating it here. It just kind of moves it over. So I would say probably no, unless I really want to kind of play it loosey-goosey to just reassociate these on a whim, and it might leave my Linux instance stranded. So where have we gone so far? We've got now the VPC created. We've defined the subnet. And by the way, a lot of this, right now I'm just kind of at the basics of VPC. Behind the scenes, it created the subnet, the routing table, the internet gateway. We can get into customization with all of these things, seriously. For now, we're just kind of leaving it at the default. We added an elastic IP address and associated it with our instance. So now that guy should be accessible. Let's test it. I'm going to bust out Secure CRT, my favorite little client. Create a new session. So I've got, well, hang on, let me move this so I can see that elastic IP address in the background. So new session, let's do SSH, that's fine. Hostname 50.18.217.229. And actually, everything AWS with Ubuntu uses the username Ubuntu instead of root. So I'm going to come in here and do session name. That's fine. We'll hit finish. We'll modify the properties because we need to connect to that guy using a public key. That's the one that we that's our key pair that we downloaded from AWS. So I'm going to choose from my list. This is in my C:\AWS CBT pair. There it is. Click OK and OK and connect. Beautiful. So we now we now have this. I'll do ifconfig. And look at that. There is our VPC verification. We are communicating using 172.30.100.20, but I actually came in using the elastic IP address that we just provisioned. We are golden. So do you see what I'm saying? How as this thing unfolds and we unpack the VPC, there's all these options associated with it. And we just saw kind of the opening. We saw the foundation. Now keep in mind, we saw a lot. We saw setting up a VPC design for your AWS account. We saw associating the subnets with it, the kind of the CIDR block, the parent block 172.30.0.0 in our case, and adding a subnet in there. We created the security groups. We added the elastic IP addresses. I mean, associated instance, static IP. I mean, we did a lot. We put a lot together, but still, you already get the feel like, wow, I've just started to scratch the surface of this thing. Like, what if I wanted more subnets? Or what if I wanted to route between those subnets? I mean, all of that will continue to unfold as we go through this. But for now, we've seen the foundation of what VPC is all about. That gives you the control of networking for free. Yeah, well, I'll say for no additional charge to your instances, Amazon allows you to do this. And, I mean, I've got to say I appreciate it from an admin side perspective, to where if I don't know anything about networking, I can come into AWS without VPC and bam, I've got servers and they're ready to run. If I've got a little more skill on the networking side or have specific needs, Amazon allows this whole alternate kind of like advanced user land of VPC where I can really get the options that I need. For now, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.